10, News at 10, with Trevor MacDonald.
Europe's big step to a single currency. Barnsley celebrates as Major loses majority. First pictures of Sir Ranulph's Antarctic rescue. And how a Lanarkshire town's living with a deadly bacteria. Good evening. The European Union, including Britain, took two major steps towards a single currency today. European leaders meeting in Dublin agreed how countries who break the rules of monetary union should be punished. They also unveiled the design of the new euro banknotes. John Major said he wasn't enthusiastic about the notes and continued to express doubts about the timetable for their introduction. From Dublin, here's our diplomatic editor, James Mates.
The leaders tonight came to dinner at Dublin's National Gallery, the end of day one of this summit, a day which has, if anything, seen the gulf between Britain and her partners grow still wider. To most of the leaders here, today has been a huge success. An ugly quarrel between France and Germany about how countries in the Eurozone should be stopped from borrowing too much has been settled through compromise. They've agreed the single currency will start on time in 1999, and they've stolen a march on the doubters by producing the euro itself.
2, 1.
The countdown to the new currency may still be 2 years away, but the new notes were unveiled this afternoon, from the €5 right up to the €500 note, which it's planned will be worth around £300. The gates and windows apparently represent the Union's spirit of openness and cooperation. More important is the psychological message that there's no turning back now.
We have agreed and reaffirmed the date for the completion of the work, and we have raised, I believe, the level of ambition of the work as far as the new treaty is concerned.
This is not what Mr. Major wanted to hear. He thinks the Union is already overreaching itself and that to get more ambitious still would be to invite disaster. Aware perhaps that this may be his last Euro summit, he wasn't going to miss the chance to warn the others of the pitfalls ahead. But is a leader in such trouble at home being listened to abroad? It didn't pass unnoticed that during the family photograph, the big guns of France and Germany were prominent in the front row. The British leader was looking a little isolated behind them. Undeterred, he called a special press conference to spell out the dangers of a flexible Europe becoming a two-tier Europe.
The wrong sort of flexibility, as I indicated this afternoon, would blow the European Union wide apart.
For all the hoopla about the new euro and the launch date, he insisted that getting the euro right was far more important than getting it started on a particular day.
Insisting on a particular timetable for political reasons is not sensible and can end in disaster. The really important matter is that the economic criteria are right.
His tone has been in stark contrast to that of virtually every other leader here. Some of this may be for consumption on the backbenches at home, but it may too be the voice of a man who, through long years of isolation in Europe, has never quite turned the debate his way. James Mates, News at 10, Dublin.
Let's go live now to Dublin and to our political editor, Michael Brunson. Mike, as James Mates said, what a marked contrast between the great leap forward, as Mr. Bruton called it, and the British doubts over this whole affair.
Absolutely. I went, of course, to both the big press conferences, and I was able to put questions directly to both to Mr. Bruton and Mr. Major. Now, when I put it to Mr. Bruton, I thought you could sense the almost bubbling enthusiasm that he had when he was talking to me about the real political will of the other countries to make EMU work. On the other hand, when I talked to Mr. Major, I sensed there that this was a sort of grim realism about the whole thing. He warning constantly, why doesn't Europe realize that there are two sorts of Europe? There's the integrationist, the centralist Europe, and there's the sort of Europe I want, which is the Europe of a cooperation of nation states. This was Mr. Major being a Euro realist, as I said, but a very sceptical tone, and one can't help thinking that one of the reasons he did that is because of the political pressures on him back home, realizing the mood of the country. He always has this balancing act, as you know. Today he decided to sound, in my view, a very sceptic tone indeed.
And what will the Eurosceptics make of this back at Westminster, Mike?
It's already pretty predictable, the reaction. People like Ian Duncan Smith have come out tonight and said, well, if you were thinking of joining the single currency, and then he took a look at these awful banknotes you wouldn't want to join, horrible rainbow-coloured thing, he called them. On the other hand, on the other side, Ray Whitney of the Positive Europeans was saying, I hope we're not going to reduce this whole argument to snide remarks. And I think it's a safe bet that tomorrow morning's Eurosceptic papers, newspapers in London, will be in absolutely full cry.
Michael Brunston in Dublin, thank you. John Major gave a stark warning to Conservative Euro-rebels today. He said if they don't behave, he could be forced into calling an election earlier than he wants to. The Prime Minister was speaking after Labour's victory in the Barnsley by-election, which left him at the head of a minority government. Our political correspondent Hugh Pym reports.
John Major woke up to life without a Commons majority and quickly made one thing clear to his MPs. We won't be forced into an early election, but only if there are no more backbench rebellions.
Operating with a very tiny majority, I've no doubt, providing people behave themselves, we'll get through to our preferred date.
I was going to say, can you hang on till May the 1st?
Well, I'm not going to indicate any particular date to you, Michael, clever though your question was. But certainly I think we'll be able to hang on to our preferred date.
Labour's victory in Barnsley East was on a very low turnout, just 33%, but the Tory share of the vote nearly halved. They were only just ahead of Arthur Scargill's Socialist Labour Party. As the Conservative chairman seemed to acknowledge, it was a disastrous result.
It would have been more disastrous if we'd been behind Arthur Scargill.
If these two worked together, the government would be in trouble. David Trimble said for now the Ulster Unionists were keeping their options open. But Tony Blair's objective is crystal clear.
I will try anything I can because it's my job and it's my duty to bring this government down because I think they're a failing and incompetent government and I think the country would be better off without them.
So how do the numbers in the House of Commons now stack up? The Conservatives hold 323 seats, Labour 272, the Liberal Democrats 26. Combined with the Ulster Unionists and the others, the opposition total is 323, matching the Tories. But Sir John Gorst says the government can't rely on his support. If you take out his vote, the Tories are in a minority. And one member of the last minority government says it'll mean big problems for Mr Major.
He'll have to watch every day what's happening in the House of Commons. He'll have to be sure that his allies in the House of Commons are being kept sweet.
Mr Major will have to get used to all that as soon as he's back from Dublin. A vote on fishing policy on Monday night looks like being very close. If the government lose, Labour always have the option of pushing for a no-confidence vote in order to test the new arithmetic in the Commons. Hugh Pym, News at 10, Westminster.
The woman at the centre of a row over Labour's attempts to influence a BBC personality poll was today revealed to be a civil servant. Jules Hurry, whose name was at the bottom of the memo sent to party members, was on leave from her job at the Agriculture Ministry. Labour said tonight she didn't write the memo, which was sent out without her knowledge. News at 10 has exclusive pictures tonight of the rescue of the British explorer Sir Ranulph Fiennes from the centre of Antarctica. He was dramatically airlifted to southern Chile after suffering from kidney stones during his unsupported walk across the ice. He says he's determined to have another go. From Chile, Terry Lloyd reports.
For 2.5 hours, the rescue plane had spotted nothing as it scoured the Antarctic wastes. Then, suddenly, Sir Ranulph Fiennes' tiny tent was seen. The 52-year-old explorer insisted on coming out to greet his guests despite the excruciating pain. Still without support, he boarded the rescue craft before pouring out the truth. He'd spent 2 days and nights screaming out aloud. Not even overdoses of morphine substitute tablets could take away the pain. The flying doctor, who'd been sent in to treat him, appreciated the agony he was in.
They say it's a terrible pain. It's worse than childbirth.
I didn't want to tell you that, but now you said it, you're dead right.
The decision was taken to knock him out for the duration of the flight back home. And as his camp was broken down, it was clear his equipment had also taken a battering during his 450-mile trek.
Yeah, I've seen that happen before. Goodness me.
Fiennes, who'd not been able to eat or rest for the previous 48 hours, slept for the remainder of the trip. At Patriot Hill's base camp, he tried to leave the plane without help, but quickly fell into the arms of his friends. He was told by the doctor to save what strength he had, and a sled was called in to take him away to a waiting plane. From there, he was taken 7 hours north for proper medical care. Today from Santiago, I spoke to him in his hospital bed when he revealed he had not given up.
What do you plan to do?
Well, my main aim is to try to get back to Antarctica, to the exact spot where it happened, and to carry on from there. Obviously not as a purely unsupported expedition, but nobody has ever crossed Antarctica solo, supported or unsupported.
And so 4 weeks to the day since I shook his hand and bade him farewell at the edge of Birkner Island on the Antarctic ice, Sir Ranulph Fiennes is making plans to return. But at the end of the day, it will be down to the medical experts. Once they've completed their tests, they'll decide if he can set foot back on the frozen wastes or if he must come here to the capital city for specialist medical treatment. Terry Lloyd, News at 10, Santiago in Chile.
Here there was bad news for 3.5 million homeowners today as two of the biggest building societies increased their mortgage rates. The Halifax, Britain's largest leader, excuse me, put up its rate by just over 1/4%. The Nationwide followed with a similar increase. Rates for savers would also go up, although it's not known by how much. A nurse has been infected with the food poisoning bug that's now killed 11 people in Scotland. She's been treating patients who were already ill with the E-coli bacteria. Earlier, Scotland's chief medical officer predicted the worst of the outbreak could be over by the end of the week. Here's our health editor, Lawrence McGuinty.
Just as it was looking as if the Lanarkshire epidemic was coming to an end, a nurse who treated 2 E. coli patients at the Falkirk and District Royal Infirmary has come down with the disease.
We are obviously re-examining our barrier nursing procedures. We have no reason to believe that there's been a major shortfall in those, but clearly, somehow, she has contracted the infection, presumably from a patient.
The new case was announced only hours after Scottish Secretary Michael Forsyth visited the Aberdeen laboratory, where over 1,000 specimens from the outbreak have been analysed, normally 4 years' work. The head of the lab, Professor Hugh Pennington, is leading the expert investigation. His group has 3 main aims: to examine the circumstances which led to the outbreak, to advise on its implications for food safety, and to find out the general lessons to be learned. The outbreak that started here at Bar's Butchers now involves over 200 confirmed cases. Critics say action has been too little, too late.
I think everyone appreciates now, and we see this belated recognition in the setting up of the Cabinet subcommittee, just what a devastating bacterium this is and just what a devastating incident this has been. It's just a pity that so many people have had to die before that level of recognition has been accorded.
It's not clear yet whether the new case marks further headaches for Mr. Forsyth or whether it's an isolated incident. Lawrence McGuinty, News at 10.
An Irish Catholic priest has been jailed for 2.5 years for abusing boys and girls. Father Joseph Steele from Belfast had been moved a number of times before he was arrested in Rotherham. Families of his victims say church authorities knew about the allegations 5 years earlier. From Belfast, John Draper reports.
Father Joseph Steele, here on the right, was convicted of abusing 10 boys and girls in Belfast over 14 years. His first victim was an 8-year-old altar boy. For years the children said nothing until Steele moved to a County Down parish where several of the youngsters, by then adults, confronted him. He was reported to his bishop but not the police. He left to work in Rotherham. The case only came to trial 5 years after the allegations emerged. Passing sentence, the judge told Steele that sexual abuse of children was a serious offence, particularly because you enjoyed the trust of the children, their parents and the schools and organisations in which you worked. One victim, who wanted anonymity, accused the church of a cover-up.
They have no concern for the victims of abuse at all. As I had said, they just moved the priest from parish to parish. This is a pattern we've seen in the past that they've done with other priests. They try to bury the issue.
When people are traumatised by terrible experiences at the hands of priests that they trusted, it's understandable that when they're hurt in that way, when they're in pain, they say things in anger and they attach blame where perhaps blame is not appropriate.
This is the latest in a spate of child sex cases involving Catholic priests. Tonight the church apologised and said new procedures to protect children had been brought in. John Draper, News at 10, Belfast.
The United Nations Security Council has finally chosen the man to replace Boutros Boutros-Ghali as the UN Secretary-General. It was announced tonight that Kofi Annan of Ghana will succeed him in the new year. Mr. Annan is currently the UN's head of peacekeeping. Palestinian leaders are tonight accusing Israel of wrecking the Middle East peace process. Tension escalated today when the Israeli government announced tax breaks to help Jewish settlers. Then came reports of rockets being fired from Lebanon into northern Israel. Here's our Middle East correspondent, Robert Moore.
In Gaza today, thousands of supporters of the Islamic group Hamas held a rally, while the military wing announced it would resume its campaign of suicide bombs on Israeli targets. There is now a renewed sense of crisis across Palestinian society, fueled not just by Hamas, but by calls from the radical PFLP faction for a new uprising against Israel. This evening's rocket attack by Hezbollah on northern Israel only confirms that the enemies of the peace process are moving center stage. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's decision at today's cabinet meeting to strengthen Jewish settlements has fueled Arab anger. The cabinet ministers voted in favor of giving the settlers significant financial help, reverting to a policy not seen here for 5 years, since the days of the last hardline government. Netanyahu is identifying closely with the cause of the settlers, and today's policy shift will be seen in the Arab world and in the West as another blow to the peace process. The settlements of the West Bank, already housing over 100,000 Jews, are now likely to grow further, a step that many Palestinians are saying tonight makes further talks almost meaningless. If the cabinet decision is fully implemented and settlements rapidly expand, Palestinian dreams of establishing their own state will be shattered, and many more Palestinians will favor a return to the violent struggle of the past. Robert Moore, News at 10, on the West Bank.
A teenager who raped a 93-year-old woman as she visited her husband's grave was detained for 12 years today. The attack occurred in a churchyard in West Sussex. The judge told Steve Barton the offence was so appalling it made the blood run cold. A judge in Teesside warned today of the terrible results of carrying knives after the killing of a 16-year-old boy. Ian Gamble was stabbed through the heart after a scuffle. Another boy was cleared today of his murder. And the longest-running libel trial in British history came to an end today. 2 environmental campaigners were taken to court by the fast food chain McDonald's 2.5 years ago. The final judgment is due next year. We reported earlier on the programme on the nurse who has become the latest victim of the food poisoning outbreak in Lanarkshire, which is now one of the worst such epidemics in the world. At the centre of it all is a small town called Wishaw. 3 weeks ago, a few people there even heard of E-coli 0157, the bug that's caused them so much misery. So how have the people of Wishaw been coping? Tim Ewart found out for tonight's special report.
In Wishaw today, they were saying prayers for the sick and remembering the dead.
We pray for all those who have died. We remember especially all those victims of the E. coli infection during the past few weeks.
For Ignatius McLibel, the prayers were answered. His wife Catherine is finally being released from hospital.
She's one of the lucky ones, thank God. The first 4 days she was very ill, you know, very white, colour of death, as I describe.
On the streets of Wishaw, there remains a profound sense of shock. It's as if the E. coli has reached into every corner of the community. It will be hard to make this a festive Christmas.
Wishaw is an unremarkable town which has experienced a devastating sequence of events. Local health officials hope the worst may now be over. But for people living in this area, the E. coli scare continues to be a terrifying reality.
What symptoms did you have? Sickness and diarrhoea and stomach cramps and sweats.
Gillian Logan fears she may have been infected. This is her 5th visit to the health centre, the 5th sample of blood she's been asked to provide. She must still have 2 more tests, and like many others, she's worried and angry.
We weren't warned, obviously, quickly enough to react, and a lot more people have become ill as a result of it. It just wasn't reacted quickly enough.
People still pour in to be checked, 3 weeks and 11 deaths after the infection was made public. Nearly 900 have been tested in Wishaw alone. The walkers were positive. 5-year-old Greg was taken ill first, then parents Alan and Sharon. They'd bought cold pork from their local butcher.
God forbid, it could have been my son that could have died from it.
You just don't know. I won't go back to the shop. You know, we've not bought cold meat again. You know, we're scared to kind of buy cold meat until, you know, this is kind of, there's an end come to all this.
But life does go on at this Lanarkshire community centre. Senior citizens were doing their best to mark the festive season with a hearty meal. Nevertheless, no one can forget it was at a similar gathering that the E-coli first took hold, and that it is the elderly who remain most at risk.
I don't feel happy about here tonight, and I was looking forward to this, to tell you the truth. I feel I'm going to get meat, and I haven't had meat this week.
No warning, as far as I'm concerned, there was no warning. And there should have been a warning long before it was made public.
You trust the food you're buying, so you should be able to enjoy it. And then you're frightened to go out to dinners now, just in case.
The body of Christ.
At church, meanwhile, they'll continue their daily prayers until the crisis is over, until they have the faith to believe that the E. coli will not come back. Tim Hewitt, News at 10, Wishaw.
Sports news now, and Liam Botham's cricketing son Liam has abandoned his father's game to become a professional rugby union player. After signing a 3-year contract today to play for West Hartlepool, he admitted switching from cricket had been a tough decision, but said he'd always preferred rugby. In Zimbabwe, Darren Goff took 5 wickets to return career-best match figures of 11 for 139 today, helping England to victory over Matabeleland. England's first one-day international against Zimbabwe is on Sunday. And Ryan Giggs returns to the Welsh side tomorrow for their World Cup game against Turkey in Cardiff. Wales must win to have any hope of qualifying for the finals. And the main headline again tonight: the European Union has taken 2 major steps towards a single currency. European leaders meeting in Dublin agreed how countries who break the rules of monetary union should be punished. They also unveiled the design of the new euro banknotes. And finally, in News at 10 tonight, we return to the design of the new euro banknotes. John Major's reaction was lukewarm, but what about the British public? We sent ITN's Lauren Taylor to canvass opinion.
For Christmas shoppers out tonight, the question was what to buy. Most were blissfully unaware that the curtain had been lifted on the new euro. But after 1999, the British wallet could contain a whole new set of notes. The smallest note would be €5, worth £3.75. Next would be the 10, 20 and 50 euros. But don't expect change from your newsagent for the largest note. At today's rate, it would be worth £375. We asked shoppers whether they liked the new designs.
I'd never thought they'd be so different, I suppose. I just thought they'd be the same as an English pound or £5 note, but they actually look really Italian or Spanish.
The designs, well, I'm sure they spend a lot of money on them, but they don't quite do it for me.
I suppose you'd get used to it, like you get used to foreign currency when you're abroad.
We also took them along to a banknote expert.
I would imagine the brief for these banknotes is to produce something that is as, obviously as colourful as possible, but as bland as possible, so that no offence can be caused to anybody.
Ultimately, most people will be more worried about how much they have in their pocket, not what it looks like. Lauren Taylor, News at 10.
That's News at 10 tonight, and for this week, ITN has bulletins throughout the weekend here on ITV. The late news tomorrow is at 8:30. We're back on Monday. From all of us here at ITN, good night and have a good weekend.
Hello, good evening. At the moment we've thickening cloud over Scotland and Northern Ireland with outbreaks of rain preceded by sleet and snow, but at least milder temperatures by the end of the night. Now, in direct contrast, further south it's a case of sharply dipping temperatures and a widespread frost with some freezing fog patches floating around. So watch out for that mist and fog sticking early on tomorrow morning, but it soon lifts and it settles into a dry, bright and sunny day, but cold with it. Now further north over Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's a case of cloudy skies and outbreaks of rain, especially so to the west, with sleet and snow on the higher ground. During the course of the afternoon, we see brighter skies for eastern Scotland as well as Northern Ireland, but the cloud at the same time thickening in the north and west of England and Wales. In fact, some very light patchy rain sinking as far southwards as North Wales by the end of the afternoon. But we see the southeastern corner hanging on to that dry and bright weather. Temperatures here are disappointing to say the least. 5 is only 41 in Fahrenheit, more like 8 or 9, upper 40s further north. Add on that ever-freshening wind and it'll feel all the colder. So now a very quick look ahead to Sunday, and for Scotland and Northern Ireland, cloudy as well as breezy. We see outbreaks of rain, some sleet and snow on the Scottish mountains there. To the west, it's a case of cloudy skies with some patchy drizzle around, especially coastal areas. But for central as well as eastern parts, much drier, brighter, and certainly milder than the sort of temperatures we've been seeing recently. In fact, we're expecting temperatures to come in at around about 8 or 9. Now, 8 is 46 in Fahrenheit. We could even see them hitting the odd 10 in some favoured places. That's 50. And that's all from me.
Power gen, generating electricity whatever the weather.
LWT weather, sponsored by First Choice Ski Holidays, for a fresher outlook.
Hello there once again. Well, any remaining rain is in the process of clearing away, leaving mist and fog patches tonight and dipping temperatures down as low as -5 in some rural areas. We'll see icy stretches on the roads. Do watch out for these. The mist and fog lift quite quickly tomorrow morning, leaving a sunny morning. By afternoon, temperatures reach a high of 5 or 41 in Fahrenheit. At the same time, things start clouding over once again. And that's all from me. Good night.
For a detailed forecast, call Weather Update, sponsored by First Choice Holidays on 0891 11 0000.